Hello chess friends, this is International Master Valeri Lilov, and welcome to today's lecture on one of Magnus Carlsen's best games. This game was played in the Lawson Young Masters tournament in year 2005 when Magnus was only 15 years old, yet he was one of the best grandmasters in the world, and this game in particular utilizes two of his most powerful techniques that I'd like to bring to your attention. After the moves of e4, c5, knight f3, and then d6, what you realize in this position is that white is playing the normal line of Sicilian. There's a knight off, so in case of the exchange, recaptures, and then the move of knight f6, white advances with knight to the c3. What you like to know is that this is the kind of variation which, first and foremost, allows white to control the center, but it actually does it at a little bit of a cost. And the cost is that he has to lose a little bit of his control by spending a few extra moves with the development. So basically, after the move of a6, white played bishop e2, e6, and f4. Now, what we see here is an instructive position. The first thing that you realize is that white isn't just going for the simple, let's control the center. What he wants to do, essentially, is to back up a couple of valuable squares around the center, in particular at the square of e5. And then, given that black is unable to move in there, white will be able, or she should have the chance to castle, set up the bishop on the e3, and then very quickly, move along that area. The bishop from the e2 will likely find its way to go to f3, and the position around the center is solid. When black advanced with bishop to the e7 on his own, this is where white castles short castles, and now white played a4. I've always been a great fan of moves that apply strong restriction. It's not always possible to do them, but when we have those, like with the move of a4 that white just did, it gives you the chance to keep your opponent a little back. And so that gave white a great opportunity to further advance and actually go ahead with bishop f3, rook a7, and bishop to e3. Now take a look at this. This is no special development. We're not talking about can white win because of this position or not. We're talking about a command. Now remember this. The command of development is when certain amount of pieces are all well set and effectively pushed or advanced to challenge our opponent. With the possibility to have that bishop on f3 and the bishop on a3, white has a very strong command, which really leads to things. It's not just, oh, we're standing well. There is more to that, and white is actually planning to get it. Black, on the other hand, is going to have to finish up the development, and upon completing it, he might look for a way to counter. But yet, trouble is that the majority of his own pieces are yet on the back ranks, and they don't have that easy way to come forth and open or attack. So what's coming up after this move? Well, after the move of bishop to the e3, as white played it, basically black plays rook c7, and this is a good moment for you to think about what you would like to do yourself in this position. I mean, it is a very solid position. We have space and certainly a good amount of opportunities, but we must be able to do something more with this position than just say that we're well placed. It's a strong knight. It's good pawn structure. Even the bishops look actually quite wonderful. So how do we use that? Advance. I always say, if you want to take advantage of such a position, one of the best ways to go is to think about advancing. f5 is incredibly valuable. Not just in terms of the way and how this looks, because this looks really terrific, but it actually is valuable because it instantly breaks the opening, the position. It's like if black plays with e takes f white is ready to continue with knight takes f. That could lead to a possible exchange of the bishop for the knight, and literally all the white important pieces are going to get open. If you look at black, now there we have a problem. Carlsen knew that when you get a solid development, the only thing that you need to do is going to be to actually find out how the position can open, so you could really utilize that development and break the opponent's position. With the move of pawn up to the f5, black plays rook to the c4, and now we have this really good question to ask ourselves. What do we do right here? Space is good, control is excellent, so what now? Well, we could continue with the development, and I would usually recommend you to continue with development, but think about this. The first technique that Carlsen used to get to this point was to actually acquire a solid development and a lot of space, and that is very, very important. You need that. But then the second thing that we often need, so we can be just as successful, is to use that space and the control and acquire more, usually through a flank attack. What the move of bishop to the pawn up to the g4 does in this moment is that it basically brings white to the perfect idea of pushing g5. And if it really comes up in this exact way, it's not just going to be the black knight that will have to go back, but it's going to be also the rest of our pieces, and all of them actually, coming together and moving to trouble the opponent. It's a beautiful move, and it's a wonderful idea to get it going. G4 really made it work. The secret is that no matter what is going on, you've got to think that space, activity, and better control are only temporary things. Unless you find a way to convert them, you wouldn't be able to utilize them successfully. So white actually continues. He plays queen to the d2, and then black plays knight h7. He saw the possibility of a sacrifice on the h7. He said, I'm not letting you do that. I'm going to have the g5 just as good as you're actually having the control there, and you're not going to make this happen. So the bigger question right now is, what should white be able to do, given that there is no immediate capture on that point? So how does white continue here? Do we break through in some other way? Do we develop? Do we do something else? What's the right way? The better idea is to think. If you can break through immediately, then the best move is to gather more pieces. Rook a to the d1. What was so wonderful about it is that as white simply brings all these pieces into the play, now black may do the move of bishop g5, but white doesn't care, because literally after the exchange, recapture, and then bishop to the g2, things look excellent. The position on the king's side is actually solidified, knight on the d4, and a couple of the other pieces feel excellent, and then we're ready to continue in any way we want, as long as this position retains its power. Remember, every attack is not being successful because of the good amount of pieces that you'd have. I mean, you'd love to have that. It's not being successful of the opponent's weakness or due to that, although that could be a good point. Every attack is only being successful because of the amount of power, firepower, as I like to call it, power play that we could use to challenge our opponent. And the truth is that white has already acquired a tremendous space around the center, a great development that comes in with these next moves. So what we need to do is we need to keep it. See, you may not be able to do anything immediate with it, but if you keep it for long enough, I guarantee if you keep it for long enough, soon or later, most likely sooner, there is going to be an opportunity. There is going to be a chance for you to use it and, advance or attack against your opponent in one way or another. That's how it's supposed to be played. So after the move of bishop to the g2 from white's side, apparently we realize that black is a little bit off. So what did black do now? Bishop g2, knight d7. Of course, his idea was just to make the knight come close. So what do we do? If you have everything in line, like all your pieces, all your strength and possibilities, the thing that you want most is to open. Carlsen's idea was literally to exchange with f takes to the e, because then we see that if black actually does anything, really, like for example knight takes to the e6, knight f5, you could see the the devastation taking place against black's d6. If black, on the other hand, moves down in another way, it's like probably playing f takes to the e6. It doesn't make any difference, because then actually after f takes to the e, we've got h4. So once that knight is being pushed back, e6 is no longer protected, and then he's going to lose it. What I really love about this position after f takes to the ec is you see that there's the result of all this. Now, once we already get that type of development and that kind of space and preparation, all we need is just one or two good exchanges to simply help us open up the position and acquire the control that's most necessary there. E takes f, knight g takes f, and then h3. Of course, that's all we wanted. g4 is being well protected right now. The knights on the d4 and other squares are perfect. White has the ability, and he's thinking of a way to play knight d5 shortly. I mean, of course, it's going to take time until we bring it, but this really looks good. And if you think about black, he doesn't have so much going for him, so it's a wonderful position. Everything works well, and let's just keep it up. After the move of e takes f, knight g7, h3, black plays knight g5, and then this is where white played knight to the f5 to attack the d6. It's terrific. You see, there was no effort in which white wins that game. He knew that just bringing all those pieces together will kind of keep the potential up. So sooner or later, black was going to make a mistake, and he did. There's no other way on how this can go. It just happens. Surely now black has the d6 to be worried about, so he can't easily move back or move out, so to speak. There is that kind of problem, and there's a lot more than that, I'd say, but this certainly is. Bishop takes f, e takes f. Now the d6 is hanging, and this is where black actually decided to make a complication. It's not a real complication. Oftentimes I get this question by young players especially: when do I have to worry about my opponent's counterplay? And the idea is this: you don't. Unless there is some really necessary attack that he's making or something scary, you don't. Your opponent's counterattack likely means he's going to create damaging threats. If your opponent does not have the damaging threats necessary to maintain a kind of advance or a challenge against your position, it's likely not a counterattack. It's an attempt for him to make one, or an attempt to scare you out, but there isn't an attack that you've got to be really that much concerned about. So this is like the whole thing. After the move of pawn up to the h5, basically white plays queen next to the d6, queen next to the d6, rook takes to the d6, h takes g, and then white plays alongside bishop to the d5 check, king h7, and then there was bishop takes to the c4, knight takes to the c4, rook to the d3. And, the truth is, black's a little down. He has to worry about the g4. We've got this, in case he plays knight x to the b2, there isn't too much more that he can do. We can have rook to the d4 to attack the pawn. And black is already an exchange down, but the most important thing is that it's basically all over already after that move. Of course, black he attempted to do after rook to the d3, the move of knight takes h3 check, so that after king g2, there's knight takes to the b2. But it didn't quite work, because the moment white set up his own rook on the d4, he was also ready and capable to go with the knight d5, rook takes to the c2, king to the g3, knight g5, and then rook takes to the g4. And the truth is that it's just now every attacking force of white completely devastates black's position, leaving him with practically no counterplay. I love to see how white was able to play with pretty much every single piece that he initially started with. I see so many times people make the mistake of playing with one or two pieces because they say those are quote unquote the best pieces. And I say no. It's the formation of all these pieces that form the different threats you can create. And then the more you keep them up, the worse it's gonna keep getting for the opponent. Knight h6, rook g6, little check, king g2. Black keeps on going, but nobody cares about that because the reality is that after the king goes forth here, rook c4, king d5, rook c, king e6. There's no chance for black to stop the move of rook to h1 takes to the h6, and that's going to be devastating. It's scary, it's dangerous, black's down, his pieces are behind, and it's wonderful. And if you really go back to an earlier stage, you realize that this game was not just development and preparation, it was the pressure. Naturally, once white took away the space, his position became a lot more capable. And because of that tremendous control in both space and activity, black was just unable to feel like he could actually live again or his pieces could do anything more. So it only took a while before the rest of the attacking moves took place, and it was just wonderful. Black lost a pawn, and after that, of course, his game was already, just too bad. So knight f5 was wonderful. White got the pieces, and then everything else worked. So I hope you do understand it. In conclusion, I want to say those three actually. If you want to apply a successful strategy of positional play, first you need a fast development, a better control over the center, more space, and above all else, good coordination between the pieces. When you get all these factors, you might want to consider opening up the position or getting more tactical lines, because you're definitely going to feel that energy, that power bursting within. That was actually what Carlsen did. And he didn't need to break through or attempt any risky attacks. He let the opponent make the mistake. So once the opponent did it, essentially all Carlsen had to do was just take advantage and use that effectively. Very instructive game with a couple really, really good points that you can keep in mind and remember or understand whenever it comes to your games as well.